This is Wasteland, my cute, colorful 2D platformer that's designed around this on-off attack, and the ability to pick your path with snackable play sessions. And this video is my third devlog about it. In the last devlogs, I discussed what changed from the fourth prototype to the current build, but now I want to start getting specific and discuss what I've worked on since the summer began. With all that's been changing, I think today's video will focus primarily on the new level, the Wasteland. Developing levels is tricky. I really want to make sure each level feels fresh moment to moment, both mechanically and backgroundly. What this usually means is combining about 6 level elements, usually 3 enemies and 3 gimmicks, and a bunch of different themes. Like, let's start by looking at an older example, the Highlands. Theme-wise, at its simplest, we have a snowy city. That's already 2 themes. But there's also Christmas and candy stuff, and mountain stuff, and even a little bit of sky stuff. Some of this candy stuff is new, by the way. In terms of enemies, there's the Yeti, which runs away when you use fire and jumps when you jump. I try to demonstrate that behavior to the player in the opening section by having a Yeti behind these fire blocks, who will run away when you try to burn through them, and another over here, but hopefully the snow helps you have an easier time getting past his jump. Next there's the car, which tries to follow you around. I demonstrate that behavior in this opening section with a car that is safely underneath you, guarding a bubble power-up. And finally the elf, who launches these hats at you. In terms of gimmicks, there's snow, which mutes your jump. I put a power-up over the first snow patch to encourage players to try jumping in the snow, and added the small effect of snow getting kicked up to try to better explain what's happening. Next there's ice, which makes you slip and slide, and these balloon platforms, which descend as you land on them. Notice that for the first balloon platform there are 2 paths, one for those who get off the platform right away or use their jump to get the platform back up, and another for those who let it descend. All of these are pretty dynamic ideas in their own right, so first I tried to find interesting uses for each enemy and gimmick on its own. Like this balloon maze, where you need to deliberately use the descent property of the balloons to get lower, or these Yetis chasing you up a tower. Their jump becomes more threatening now that they're below you, and I try to find interesting ways to combine these elements, like car plus snow, car plus ice, car plus balloon platform, and new this summer, car plus Yeti. Oh, plus elf. Of course, the 3-to-3 ratio isn't necessary. Look at the island, the first level I made, which introduces only 2 enemies, but 4 gimmicks. Bouncy stuff, collapsing sand, falling coconuts, and cannons. That's a long explanation, but I'm hoping you can see some of what I'm going for in a finished level. So, how did I make the Wasteland? I had been wanting to make a pollution-y factory level for a while, since it was one of my favorite aesthetics in Prototype 4, but I wasn't sure it could make a full level, because I didn't really have any themes to pair with it. But then, when brainstorming common obstacles I hadn't tried yet, I thought of this rotating platform in Mario 64, and I thought the best way for me to communicate a rotating platform would be a gear. So I returned to the pollution factory level notes and started asking, is there anything else on my wish list I can combine with this idea? And yeah, I'd wanted to do a haunted house for forever, and I thought that could fit really well. The gears would actually look kinda cool in a haunted house. And so I got the Wasteland, whose main theme is haunted factory, but with the sub-theme of pollution and decay/ruins/abandoned places. The other obstacles started to come together. I had the idea for a while of an enemy that tries to trace your vertical movement. See, an earlier level idea had been a cinema, where you go in and out of various movies, and when I was looking for an enemy that could appear across multiple genres of movie, I'd written down the idea for a camera enemy that would be trying to film you. I ditched the cinema level because I couldn't come up with a way to make the obstacles feel like they belonged in every genre and yet be recognizable across the genres, but I really liked the idea of the camera enemy. It felt like a vertical twist on the car. So after some false starts, I realized the spider was the perfect skin for the enemy in this environment, since one of the main themes was abandoned places. I wanted a ghost like Boo from Mario, but I couldn't just copy Boo's movement, so I came up with this, a character who flees when you use fire breath. Kinda like the Yeti. I couldn't just use a standard ghost sprite either, since the genie in the Outlands already looked ghostly, but I doodled up something I thought was cool, and then I worked on the movement, since there was this issue early on where I would use fire breath to try to kill the enemy, not quite catch up, and then the enemy would immediately turn around and kill me, which felt really bad. So now the enemy continues to flee even after you turn off your fire breath. And I'd also been intending for a while to do an enemy that aims at you, kinda like the cannon in Kirby's Adventure. And so here's this guy. He's even kinda structured like Kirby cannons, but I came up with this alien look to distinguish him from my own cannons. And then to make his projectile feel a little different from the other projectiles, I decided it would be a laser. The factory would also allow me to do fans, which I'd been wanting to do since they were for some reason one of the most memorable parts of Kirby's Dream Land 2 for me. And actually, that's it. Only 2 gimmicks. Technically there's these mines as well, which will not be appearing anywhere else in the game, but I consider them so easy to avoid that they're practically scenery. I kinda just felt like I needed to do underwater mines at some point because they were in the last prototype and in other games I'd played, which left me one more level-specific thing to do, so I made the Ghost Knight, which is basically the normal knight, except he's not necessarily confined to the ground, and unlike the knight, he won't be affected by fans. It's half a new enemy. So now I need to come up with a beginning room to introduce as many of these concepts as I can. First, I thought of this idea as maybe a part of the room. See, the main idea of the rotating platforms is trying to stay on top of them, so I thought a fun twist would be trying to fall off them. And I also thought falling off them would be easy, and so it would be a good way to introduce the gimmick. When I tried it, however, it was really kind of tricky. It also didn't seem like it would be fun to replay, but it was still really neat and different, which I liked, so I called it a bonus room and stuck an unlockable character in there. Bonus rooms tend to be rooms that I think are really neat and want to show to the player, but they have a flaw. They may be too difficult for the level they're in, or not fun to replay, or maybe possible to mess up in a way that they can't be completed. Back to the drawing board. I had this idea where you start in a small room and a giant gear acts as a revolving door, another safe way to introduce the gear concept, and it fits into one of my favorite level opening tropes, where you start in a confined space that opens up. Follow that with these easy gear platforms, and introduce the fan by having it as an alternate route up. Except I don't like that, because why wouldn't you always use the fan? And if you're using the fan, the lack of jumps is kind of boring. Okay, introducing this wall. I know it's not a new gimmick, but it's amazing what this wall did for the feel of this room. It forces you to jump here, which for some reason is way more engaging, and now that fan is out of the way. Okay, but I don't feel like I've introduced the fan to players who just use the gears, so we'll put one here with a power-up for players to toy around with. Let's introduce the enemies next. The Ghost Girl is too difficult with the gears, and truthfully too difficult to be this early in the level. We'll move her later in the level. In the end, I put her in room 2. The Ghost Knights don't need an introduction because they're similar enough to normal knights, but they'll add a bit of flavor. I put a spider between the gears here for an interesting obstacle, then added a safe spider earlier so the player could learn how they work. That leaves the Aimergoo. In my original sketches, I envisioned an underwater tunnel with 2 Aimergoos. You'd have the choice to leave the underwater tunnel to go to the oil rig, or stay in the underwater tunnel to get to another part of the factory. I ditched this tunnel because I couldn't figure out how to convey the connection from the tunnel to the outside cleanly, and I worried it would obscure the drill of the oil rig. And when I decided the upper path would require a water dragon to access, I thought that was easier to see without the tunnel there. With the tunnel gone and the addition of the Ghost Girl, I decided it was better to find a different place early in each path to add the Aimergoos. Finally, can we add multiple paths to this first room? Well, I'm always looking for ways to use the fire blocks creatively. I don't want them to always just be walls, so sometimes I use them to block gimmicks, like this log in the woodland. How about they block a fan? And that fan can take you to the top of the rotating gear, so you get a different relationship with it. It's rotating in the same direction you're going this time, and it can push you upward. But if you go up, you won't encounter that safe spider, so I've added another safe spider at the beginning here. And I'm really happy with this. I think it would be obnoxious to go over every room in this way, but let me show you some of the combos I was thinking about. Eye on gear, I finally did that over here. Fan on gear, I decided that would be tricky to program and even trickier to use in a meaningful way that the player would understand. Fan to gear with 2 asterisks, that means that this is absolutely essential. After all, part of why I made the fan in this level is because I thought it would combo with the gear in this way. Ghost Knight plus gear, check. Knight plus gear, I didn't do that because the knight would just fall off. Knight plus fan, check. Ghost Knight plus fan, check. Oh, and hey, here's a place where you can see the difference in how they react to the fan. A little later, I have some unused combos, like different speed gears or this sketch of an aimer guy in a fan. Who knows, maybe I'll return to this level. It was only very late I discovered this early note for a spider elevator, and I came back to add that in. The star of this level's environmental design is definitely this oil rig. I make some of my bigger designs by looking up clip art as reference. Clip art usually does a good job of making something simple but recognizable. Sometimes cartoon is also a good search term for me. I have no idea what makes me recognize an oil rig. I don't see them very often, but I always seem to recognize them when I do. So what clip art looks the most oil riggy to me? I really like the colors on this one, and the leaky oil on this one. Part of what I'm looking for is the most essential stuff. This looks like an oil rig with only a tower and a crane, and this one doesn't have a crane but has a helicopter pad instead. So here's what I came up with as a rough sketch, and I deviated from that slightly when I put it in the game. There were of course other clip art searches to help me design other parts of the level, but the oil rig is the thing I'm most proud of. Finally, the testing. I test each room as I go, but I also try to test at the end that each exit scores roughly equal to the other exits in other levels. 55 is what it takes to get an S rank, so when I play, I'm hoping that the maximum score I can get out of any exit in any level is somewhere between 70 and 80. I was scoring below 70 in the haunted house, so I added extra coins and diamonds, and over 80 in the polluted sky, so I added some extra length. And now all the scores are right where I want them. And that's it! The level's up now, and you can play it in the game. I hope you found this behind the scenes look interesting. I will confess to simplifying a few things, mostly how things happen sequentially. Like, this wall was actually probably the last thing added to the introduction to the level. I was already in the final testing phase, and I just noticed that the introduction wasn't fun to replay without any forced jump. Alright, I have to end this video sometime. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to try Flamelight for yourself, there will be a link in the description. Thanks again.